Okay, guys, welcome to today's course. My name's Johnny, and I've been doing this for over 15 years. I've always had an incredible fascination with metaphysics and the esoteric. Ever since I was a little guy, yay high, I lived in a house where we were told that we weren't allowed to explore these subjects. It was a greatly religious house. And although we had an understanding of the spiritual dimensions of these sort of ideas, while other kids were hiding Playboys under their beds, I was hiding metaphysical books and esoteric literature and tarot cards and studying them. And I'd run off to the esoteric bookstore and study everything I could get on the subject. And of course, it's just grown from there. You know, the rabbit hole just keeps getting weirder and weirder the deeper and further you go. As you guys know, today the course is on the secrets of the tarot, and today we'll be going over these subjects in depth with you. So, what we're going to be learning today is we're going to be talking about the rich historicity of the tarot and the esoteric mysteries that come with it. We have a lot of symbolism, and as you go along, there's going to be times when we will reference the handouts that you will have. And for those of you who are watching at home, we will have copies of these handouts in PDF format that you can reference. We're also going to be discussing how psychic energy works, the concepts of psychism, consciousness, and we'll relate it on the quantum level to how we can understand this in physics principles. You will also understand the concepts of how to give readings, and not just regular readings. I would like you to know how to give accurate readings, to use these tools to draw out the very highest states of consciousness and energy that you possibly can from them. What I want you to know today is that divination or divination tools are very old. They come from the Latin divinare, to foresee, to be inspired by God. And essentially, a lot of people that have come to me over the years, and believe me, at certain times I've been petitioned by religious groups. They've gone so far as to walk with a cross, carrying it across with a sign that saying you're doing the devil's work. And to me, I've always thought that was ironic, because I've always appreciated the rich spiritual concepts in the biblical texts. But the very concepts of divination tools are mentioned in the Bible itself. The priests had this thing known as the Urim and the Thummim, which was on their breastplates. That essentially what would happen is they would be these colored stones that would change colors before they went in and went to battle or made any great decisions. They also used broken arrowheads, and that's very biblical. It's right in the Bible. Of course, we see other systems such as the runes. We see the I Ching. We've used colored sands, and of course tarot cards and pendulums, and all those things have been used, but these things go back to bibliomancy, flipping open books to get your answers, to crystalmancy. So divination is not a new concept. Essentially today when we're talking about the tarot, you're not just talking about a tool that's just a couple of mistaken images that are put together. This tool is extremely, not only old, but we believe it originates not only into the ancient Egyptians, but a lot of what we know about the tarot has been found in Ireland. The oldest history of tarot is mentioned in the ruins of megalithic Ireland, where we get it. We get such concepts such as the stone, which we also see, as you'll go on to see, as pentacles or discs. And the stone we can see has a connection over into kingship. How many of you have ever heard of where the throne sits, that there is a stone that sits underneath it? Which this stone, we can even go back into King David, or where this comes from, as being very sacred. We also see the cauldron of Dagda, or Dagon. We see the cauldron being a very sacred item that's mentioned in these runes that we see on the tarot. We see the lance of Lu, the sun god. And many of you have, if you've ever seen, the name London, you start to see Lu and then Dawn. And if you want to find out more about this, you can look up the works of the great Michael Tazarian, or Jordan Maxwell, or even Manly P. Hall, who unearthed incredible research on these items. We see the sword. The sword has a lot of incredible history in this. And the sword, like we mentioned, like you see with Excalibur, or certain kings being mentioned in history, being able to fight off mythological creatures and beings and have an interdimensional quality. And so essentially we also see the connection into ancient Egypt. We see these exact same symbols, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. But of course, when you get into card 11 on the Major Arcana, which is the Justice card, you see with the scales being weighed. And for those of you who have used the tarot before, you'll remember this picture. You see it being connected to Maat. We see in Egypt, the zodiac was actually found on the ceilings of the temples. And it's actually known that there are actually 88 signs in the zodiac. Some of the earliest recorded history we can find of the zodiac you find comes back from the ancient Sumerians. And if you go and look up the work of the great Zachariah Sitchin, you'll see that where the Sumerians potentially got their information from to get the zodiac, to get the medicine, to get the things in our earliest recorded civilization was possibly from the extraterrestrials. But that's a whole other different topic. So most certainly we start to see that this tarot is really old. It's not something that's a new concept. So when we start to look at the tarot, there is a lot of history here. We can see the English and the French word for tarot is thought to derive from the Italian tarocchi, which is no known origin or etymology. And one theory is that it would relate to Taro, to the Taro River in northern Italy. And there are some ideas that it might originate from an Arabic word. But where a lot of scholars will agree and tend to think this to be more plausible is the relation from the word Taro to Torah. Okay? And we start to see there being a deep connection into the Kabbalah in ancient Egypt. So when we start to look at this, the history of the tarot, where it comes in, even throughout Europe. Playing cards first entered Europe in the late 14th century, probably from Mamluk, Egypt, with suits very similar to the tarot suits of the swords, staves, cups, and coins or discs, pentacles, stones, which we were just talking about. And they're still used in traditional Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese decks. The earliest written document mentioning a tarot-like card set occurs as early as 1227. And it says that Italian children are instructed in the knowledge of the virtues via sheets, the cards. Okay? But here's the kicker. The tarot has some incredible connections with the Kabbalah. Like it's pretty much uncanny. We start to see that in the tarot, it's based off of a lot of the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, which is very, very mystical on how that comes from. And a lot of people think that it originated from the Jewish people and where it came from, but the actual origins of where the Hebrew alphabet came from are very mystical. They came from Egypt, where the high priests would go and observe the Great Pyramid, and where there was a crystalline dongles-like structure that would be on top of the pyramids, and the sun would shine through it. The sun god Ra, as Michael Tazarian teaches about this as well, where it would come through and it would leave a shadow on the ground, and this shadow would start to be recorded as these great letters, and how these vowels would have these incredible mystical spiritual connections. Now, the other thing with these 22 letters is that there are 22 cards in the Major Arcana of the tarot. And we will see, as we go along, these 22 cards and what they mean. But most certainly, we can start to see that even on the Tree of Life, which is in the Kabbalah, there's 22 pathways that come up with all the tarot. We start to see an origin of basically the Gnostic teachings, the Torah being the Old Testament of the Bible, which is based off of. So you have these hidden secrets all the way through it. You have this ancient system that's been recorded. And by the way, I'd like to add, is that that's where the Kabbalah comes from. And when we get this, and if you look at the history of not only what some have considered the lost tribes of Israel, or if you look at where the Jewish people would come from, or who the pharaohs really were, you'll remember in the biblical stories of where Moses came out of. And Moses was doing the Kabbalah, okay? When Moses was going in to talk to Pharaoh's magicians, he was throwing his staff upon the ground, and the staff was turning into a serpent and eating theirs. He was parting the Red Sea and doing Kabbalistic practices. Now here's another thing for you guys. It's a fun fact. Not a necessary fact for you to know in order to read the tarot. So don't worry, don't feel too overwhelmed with this. Many of you guys are probably familiar in a lot of New Age literature. You've heard, how many of you have ever heard of Doreen Virtue? Okay, so I see she puts out all the angel cards and everything. There seems to be this huge culture nowadays, and rightfully so, it's an interesting one, of angels. And most certainly angels are great. They're spiritual helpers. They're mentioned all throughout history. In every single culture around the world, we get the mentioning of angels. Angel just simply means messenger in Greek. But the thing is, with angels, a lot of people don't know where we get all these angel names from, as same as demon names in the occult. Essentially, here's a little secret that's known to Kabbalists. If you go into the book of the Bible, Exodus 14, 19 through 21, we're talking about Moses. And here's a little Kabbalistic secret for you guys. It goes back into the Hermetic secrets of Europe, where we get the 216 name of God, the explicit name, or the tetragrammaton. And there's 72 groups this is divided into, just like this. And what we essentially do is they take this backwards, and they start to take every other word, and they add an O-N or an L on the end of it. Either these sort of 72 times in a row. Okay, so what we start to see with this is that this is where we start to derive the names of the angels and demons that they start to bring out. Just like in the Goetia, which has been mentioned, from even apocryphal books from the Arts of Solomon that go into working with these demons, or this demon evocation, or with the angels. The O-N signifies a demon name at the end of the name, then it comes in there. The L, L-E-H-L, simply means he who is like God. So that's where you get a lot of the angel names. But essentially, what we start to get this connection with, the earliest connection between the Shemhapharash and the tarot was mentioned by Eliphas Levi, who was an occultist. And it was published 20 years after his death in 1875, and he divided the 72 names into pairs. And this was actually also further extrapolated out by Aleister Crowley, and it came out of the Golden Dawn's Book of Tea, the Book Tea, which we'll talk about in a moment. But essentially, the fascinating thing about this Shemhapharash is that it starts to divide the whole tarot. It divides the 72 names into the pairs and the attributes, each pair to one of the 4 court cards, or 10 numbers, or one of the 22 major arcana cards, making a total of 36 pairs. So essentially, there's an angel of the tarot. There's a connection to this. And this Shemhapharash is absolutely fascinating. If you guys go and get the time to go research this on your own, you'll see that even the phenomena of in Satanism, which, by the way, if you go and look at what Satanists do, like you get Anton LaVey, what he did is that he went and took this system of looking at the angel names, and he looked at the O-N at the end of them to signify the demons that he had used in his system, because that's where he drew it from. So again, the Shemhapharash, think of that next time you see all these angel names coming up, and the ones that are less common, you'll see that they originate from there. And if, is everyone done on this one? Okay. So, essentially today you're going to hear the term occult. Okay, and don't confuse the word occult with something scary. It's not cult. Cult is like when you get a guy with a school bus, and everybody is living on his property, and they all have to pay a dividends and have to, bow into a certain circle, and that way. The word occult, this means hidden secrets or clandestine writings. And essentially, this is secret knowledge that has been preserved, and it's been kept from the general public. The esoteric orders and the elites and people like that have greatly held these secrets. And the simple principle about occult knowledge is that it comes from your truth. You have to know thyself. It comes from your own life experiences deriving your truth. No one else can do this for you. You must have it. You must come to your own conclusions about it. But here's some fascinating things about the occult that a lot of people don't recognize. And I'm writing a new book about essentially the connection between ancient knowledge, ancient esoteric knowledge, and what we know now, what's been conferred. For example, when you see this pentagram here, or this pentacle, you'll start to see this 5-pointed star. You'll see it on your tarot today too. There's a very significant meaning to this, why it's been used in magic. why it's been used in the esoteric orders. First of all, it's supposed to be the sigil of humanity, the top part being spirit, and then you go down to the elements. You know, you got your air, your water, your fire, your earth. Essentially, why it was looked at in Satanism, this symbol of this star, it was reversed, is because a lot of them, and there are different forms of Satanism out there apparently, why they start to look at this star as being inverted is that not only does it form the Baphomet head, but they essentially put spirit facing down. And when they put spirit facing down, they put all the aspects of materialism first, of taking the pleasures of the body and all these areas up. But this symbol is actually very ancient. What we've now discovered, because of modern breakthroughs in our sciences and the way we look out in space, is that Earth and Venus orbit in this exact shape. How did the ancients know that? How did they know that the Earth and Venus went in this exact pentagram fashion? It's pretty incredible if you think about it. Second of all, you see this over here, we see this diagram that comes back when we look over at Plato. Plato's Timaeus. Here we got the ancient Pythagoreans and all these groups that are talking. And they had some very interesting theories. One of their theories is that the universe was in the shape of a dodecahedron. But we now know in science, from the Wilkinson's microwave anisotropy probe, it's a big name, WMAP scan for short, that the background, the radioactive background scan of our universe shows us that what? The universe is in the shape of a dodecahedron. These guys had incredible knowledge, and we can't deny that. We can measure it now, and no longer are we just going, oh, these guys are just quacks and charlatans, and they were far out there. They had a connection, a very real connection. So, some of the things that we're going to learn today, the principles of the tarot, the main, the hardcore stuff that's going to get us in there, the essentials, the fundamentals, are you're going to learn about the suits, what the different suits mean, how they're used, how they're read. You're going to learn about the numerology. Once you understand the numerology of the tarot, you can read any kind of deck you want. And we're going to get into that in a second. So you're going to see the basic suits that you're seeing, what they mean, as we already discussed earlier, what those are. You know, from your staves or your wands, your discs, etc. Okay? But the numerology has a basic meaning for these numbers that is universal. So it doesn't matter where you pick this up. As long as you know what the general theme is of those suits and you know the numerology, you can read these blindfolded without needing the book. A lot of people need the book and they go around chasing the book and they go, what does this one mean? What does that one mean? Throw the book away after today. You don't need it. You're going to look at the cards and you're going to ask them what they mean and they're going to talk to you. And that connection, just as Einstein points out, with the importance of the imagination, that connection that you have from your subconscious is going to drive you into giving the best tarot readings you have ever given in your life. And when you're done with that tarot, you're going to cast it aside like training wheels. And you only need it when you're using it for meditation. So then we get into the major and the minor arcana, which are just the greater and lesser cards. The major arcana has a very specific story to it, which is fascinating. As we mentioned, it has 22 cards. It's the story of humanity. It's the story of man or woman, what we go through. Another thing I'd like to talk about today, these two things right here, actually these three essentials that you're not going to get anywhere else. You see, for me, when I was a young man, I did the psychic fairs. I remember when I was going to college, and I was taking some computer networking stuff on the side. It was boring. I didn't really want to do it. On the weekends, I was hitting the road on these psychic fairs, and I had the chance to, look at some of the techniques of people that have been doing this a long time, and even doing it myself. And you get to a certain point where you'd be reading the cards, and you go, well, what the hell does that mean? You'd see this royal card or something pop up, a trump card. It'd just be a person sitting there, and I wouldn't know to use this binding techniques, which I perfected over time, of being able to extrapolate more from the cards by drawing more cards on top of it, or drawing some out of the deck, or not stopping from that position, as you guys will see. The spreads are very important. You'll make your own spreads as we go. But most certainly, the main key here is going to be pattern watching and storytelling. You guys are going to notice a pattern constantly come up. And we can get into the mechanics of how this is going to work, how the principles behind this thing can't simply be dismissed through scientific rationality or dismissing it from the law of averages. Essentially what we're going to see is that if you use 2 decks or 3 decks at once to do a reading like I have, you'll notice that the same cards are going to come out again and again, no matter where you draw them from. And they're going to come out specifically together, which is fascinating. Okay, so we're going to go a little deeper now into the suits and their meaning. But essentially, you're going to see here, and this is in your book, this image in particular today is put as a watermark on your suits page. You're going to notice it as in the background. You'll notice on the table, like there's a table on the side where you're going to notice that there is essentially an area which is going to tell you the actual name of what the suit is on the side. But you're also going to notice that this image is on the back. Okay, what we've been had sort of a modernized version of this with the playing cards is that with these, your wands or your clubs, you're going to see it as the clubs in the playing cards. With the swords, you're going to see them as spades. You're going to see the hearts as cups. And of course, diamonds are coins or discs or stones. And again, these symbols, I want you to remember, we're talking ancient Ireland, ancient Egypt. They're far older than what we believe. Okay, so here's another fun fact for you. These tarot cards used to be used to send hidden messages. At certain times of oppression in history, they've been used to send out a message that things are going to change or what was going to happen. Really a pictorial language. Essentially, these tarot cards have the same sort of, the exact same meanings, and they go about that. But we see a correlation here that with these wands, as we're going to get into, there's the element of fire, astrologically. The element of air. There's the element of water. And there's earth connected to them. This is the thing about the tarot that's absolutely incredible, is that it's deeply connected in its symbolism. Again, not only will we go deeper into this, but we have to, because the tarot is connected into astrotheology, which is astrology. It's connected into the colors, the very imagery. It's all designed to trigger your subconscious. It's a trip cord, a gag reflex. So when you look at this thing, you're going to go, "Whoa," and you're going to fall out into the cards. And it's going to be like a little elevator that's going to take you elsewhere. So that's the best thing about it. So these are the essentials. Let's get into the suits themselves. What are the things that we get into with cups, first of all? Cups, again, going back into hearts, is that cups, I want you guys to remember it this way. The cup is very much like your emotions. I want you to remember it. When you see the cups come up, it doesn't matter what kind of cups they are, whether it's people, whether it's the 2 of cups, the 3 of cups, it's going to be talking about emotional-based issues. I want you to think about, like when you drink from a cup, you're taking water in. You're taking that liquid with what's inside of you and bringing it out. Again, cups are affiliated with water astrologically, and they involve these emotional-based issues. Cups represent days when we're asking a question, and they can also represent spring when you're asking about time frames. The people of cups, as you'll see on your sheet, although not always, sometimes you're going to feel a connection to the astrology of a person. Sometimes you're going to feel the connection of another area. But essentially, these sometimes come up as people with browner hair, light browner hair, and having a certain archetypical sort of description. I put more of an in-depth description on there. But most certainly, there are all sorts of ways of reading these cards. But if you, for example, when I said that you can get days out of these cards, let's say that you guys want to ask about a certain job promotion. You want to say, when am I going to get my job promotion? You cut those cards. You get the 2 of cups. Essentially, if you got this system in your subconscious, your mind, and you're connected, you're going to be looking at 2 days, or essentially spring for the time of the year. Now this is stuff here that I'm sharing with you guys that you would have to go and read a lot of occult literature to draw this out. So you're getting the cheat sheet here. Sparing you guys the reading. Again, notice the Hebrew letters. Okay, and we start to get into Yod and all that. There's so much symbolism here. When you guys, if you go deeper into the tarot, you won't stop. Okay, like there's teachings like the BOTA teachings of Paul Foster Case, and areas where people I know they dedicate their life to getting blank tarot cards with absolutely no color on them, and they paint it themselves intricately as a meditation, and then they spend each day. I got a friend that does this. He's a very talented mathematician, and he goes into these cards, meditates, and he unlocks the secrets of the universe within them. They're designed that way. Okay, but with swords are a favorite of mine because I'm an air sign. So the swords, I'm directly connected to the swords. So you got, and by the way, I want to say that within these, when I say air sign, when you correlate this, you got your Aquarius, your Gemini, your Libras, all that fun stuff. When we're in cups, you know, you're getting into your water signs. And so you're looking essentially into the astrology of this here. So the swords are affiliated with air signs, and we get issues of the intellect and the mind. How many of you guys have ever heard the saying, she was sharp as a sword? I mean, she's sharp. You heard that one? Okay, well there is your secret. That's your secret to memorizing these. When you think of it, think of sharpness, think of the mind, think of intellect. Okay? People represented by swords usually have darker brown hair, they're go-getters. Again, this is a rough guide. They don't necessarily have to have a certain description. If you're reading the energy clairvoyantly, which we're going to get into, if you're using the consciousness part of your mind, the psychic part of the mind to read these, you're going to use this to hold on to a card if you're getting it. But essentially, the key word here is intellect. Then we move into wands. And again, I think it is so important to go over these. Even though we went into the history of what these mean, these all have such powerful significance to them. The key word here, as you'll see I put at the bottom, is creativity. The wands are affiliated with fire. They involve creative and passionate endeavors. When we get fire, we're getting the fire signs, okay? Your Sagittarians, your Aries, and the real fire and passion that comes with that. Think of a wand putting out creative energy in this world. Wands also represent weeks in the season of summer. Okay, so you want that job promotion, you get the 4 wands, you're waiting 4 weeks. I guess you could do an Ace of Swords for that for 1 month, but you get that there. People represented by wands typically have, you know, lighter blondish hair, blue-green eyes, are very creative. Essentially, that's not the case, okay? If you travel over to Korea and you're doing reading, you're going to have the energy there. It's going to be whatever you feel. These are just the occult meanings that come with this. Again, there's just so much deep symbolism that we start to get when we go into the card. Okay, now pentacles or stones or discs, this is an easy one to remember, okay? With this one we're getting materialism, we're getting earth. This is a really easy one to remember because when we look at it, it looks like a little coin in most sections or most areas. And we get this really being derived from the earth, or it's a stone connected to the earth-based aspects. And you know, with earth you get your Taurus or Virgo. You get these earth-based signs. And so pentacles really look like coins. So whenever you see them, they're going to look like money falling, or there's money issues, or you know, someone's working, or an area that's very much like that. You're going to have usually represented by people with darker hair and or darker complexion. You're going to have the aspect of telling years or the season of fall. So if you're asking, okay, when are we going to move? You get the 3 of Pentacles. You're going to be waiting 3 years essentially, unless you're asking specifically for the season. Again, you'll learn how to read these signs. You'll learn how to tell these things. Okay? So now we're going to move into the Tarot's numerology. And the numerology of the Tarot is really going to be the secret key that you guys are going to use here. I don't expect you to get this stuff all right away. And don't feel bad if this all, today I'm just going to blast you with a lot of information, and you don't feel bad if you go, oh, that's a lot, I can't get it all in my head. But the good news is that you have the handouts, you have the video, and you have lots of time. There's no race to learn this stuff. Okay? Essentially, when we start off with the ace, that's number 1. Now, a lot of these are just common sense. A lot of these are derived from basic numerology. There are other forms of numerology out there, like gematria, which we see in the book of Psalms in the Bible being arranged by. But essentially, in basic numerology, here's a fact for you that you may not necessarily need, and I put it on your sheets that you have here today. In numerology, essentially we start going up to about the 9, even though in the tarot we go up to 10. And at the 10 is usually when you simplify the number down by going 1 plus 0 equals 1. And you can get this out of your name, you can get this out of certain names, so there's a numerology attached to it. And this aspect of numbers holding specific meanings are incredible. Even if we look at geometry or Fibonacci sequences or the specifics behind numbers, they're incredible. But essentially in numerology, when we get a number 11 or 22 or 33, those are known as master numbers. Anything that multiplies by 11. So essentially, even the name Jesus is thought to be a master number equivalent that comes up with it. So if we look over here at 1, this is new beginnings, creativity, and willpower. Okay, the ace is a major issue. Whenever you see that come up, that's going to be something major. Like if you get the ace of swords, it's going to be a major intellectual issue. It's going to be the internet. It's going to be a job. It's going to be communication, a document. It's going to be something that you're doing to do with the intellect, analytical abilities, and engaging on that level. 2 is really basic. Okay, think of number 1 as creativity and a start of everything starting off with 1. You know, you start something off. 2 is partnerships. Think of 2 people together. Trust, balances, juggling items back and forth. 3 is mastery, completion, advancement. 3 was the number of completion to the Druids and held a very significant meaning there. 4 is the number of hard work, achievement, stability. 5 has to do with adventure, passion, travel. 6 is the number of growth, learning, and protection. 7 is an easy one. 7, how many of you guys have ever thought of 7 as being a lucky number? Or associated it in those ways? It's got a lot of significance to number 7. Not only biblical wise, is that it was said that God created the heavens and the earth and rested on the 7th day and went off that way. In nature we see something as circa septa, where everything goes in cycles of 7. The 7 is a very significant number that has a lot of spiritual significance. And essentially in the tarot you're seeing spiritual issues. You're seeing mysticism, healing. 8 is associated with new opportunities, good fortune, and abundance. And there's a connection to the feng shui here with the 8. And a lot of my friends in the Asian community, they like to put 8 in the numbers when they're selling something because it's thought of as good luck. And they like to put a couple 8s on there if they're selling something online. So 9 has been thought of usually as the number of Christ. It's been associated with visions, inventions, and influence. And essentially 10 is one too many. The cycle is ending. A new cycle is about to begin. And again, this is sort of a rough outline. You'll see as we go along. Don't worry about memorizing which one of these is which. You'll see when you go along that it's going to make sense to you. When you see the numbers being demonstrated in your deck, you'll notice that these have a meaning of what they mean. Okay? So when you're getting to the tarot, you're going to notice that we have these royals. These people coming up, you're going to be, what are these guys doing? What do they mean? And essentially what we start to see here is that you're going to have your page. And the confusing part about the page is we're going to get more to the page in a second. In some decks, the page has been shown as the princess. And the page essentially can also be a young child. But I also see it as an action, which we'll get to in a second. But let's just call it a younger person until we move on. We have the queen. We have the knight. And we have the king. Now, in the tarot, which we're going to talk about the origins of where these tarot cards came into our modern, from our modern thinking, from Western culture and how that came up. In the tarot, originating back to the Golden Dawn, originally the knights were actually the older persons in the magical order, and the kings were actually the younger ones. It's like a secret sort of initiation. But this was brought out by Arthur Waite and others. There was actually a few mistakes in the tarot, a couple of mistakes as it came out, which were later perfected. But essentially, we see the queen as being a woman when she comes up, the knight as being a young man, and the king as being an older man, sort of idea. And again, we do start to see the trend of bringing up, like I said, a young lady, just like the knight in some decks. But for the most part, you're going to have a young child, a woman, the young man, and the older one. Now getting to the page is an interesting one, because the page can mean more than one thing when you're doing readings. Okay, it should be noted that the page not only represents a younger person or a child, but they can also represent a certain association with the suit. So this page could essentially be, for example, I've given here, it could be for the Page of Swords. It's an intellectual issue, and the page comes up on top of an issue that's around something. It could mean you're writing a book with the swords, the page being that action. The Page of Pentacles could be you going to your job or paying a bill. That's going to come to you when you're reading the card. It's going to happen. They're all going to have a specific set of action. But I know a lot of people that strictly read this as a young child. So when you see these coming up in a row, and you're doing the binding, or you're doing the set of the in your suit, or your spread, you've got a bunch of these pages coming out with the king and the queen, you're going to see a family there. You're going to see a whole family coming out, and you're going to get the exact description of what these people are like. If you had a child that was a Page of Swords, it could be an air sign child, a very smart, intelligent child, a very articulate one. Could be a child that was very talkative, a lot of good ideas. If you see a page of wands, you got a creative child that's drawing, that's making music. You got a lot of that sort of stuff coming. Now, this is a very important part that we're going to get you to go to. I see all of you have got the Major Arcana in front of you. Okay, the Major Arcana. This is the area that the tarot. This is the area of the tarot that has some very deep keys in it. Why I've given you guys a printout of this is that in the past, what I would do in the old workshops years ago is I'd get people to spread the Major Arcana out on the table in front of them, and we'd all sit there for 10 minutes fumbling through our decks and going and finding all the cards and putting them in a row like that. But essentially, this is the secret to learning this. What we see here is that there's essentially a journey going on, and a lot of people get confused by these cards. Why I taught you guys the suits and the numerology first is that once you get the suits and the numerology of those suits out of the way, this is the easy part, guys. Don't get discouraged by these cards. These are very easy to make your way through them. And essentially, the Major Arcana is really about a journey of what we go through in life. From when we have our great existential crisis, to when we fall in love, to when we, I'm going backwards here I guess, but when we go through a part where we go through trials and tribulations, and we get tried for things in our life, and we gain and we lose. It's all about the ups and downs that we all go through in this experience we call life. So if we go through this over here, we see at the beginning of our journey we started with card 0. And this is the Fool card. Now this has often been known as the Journey of the Fool, and the Journey of the Fool is the secret to learning these. If you guys look at Circus du Soleil, have you guys ever heard of Circus du Soleil? They have an acrobatic act called the Journey of the Fool, where they go through and they have every one of these card characters spinning and doing a routine. And the Fool starts off in the world as card 0. Now, the secret here is that when you go to cards 1 and 2, this is going to be a real key for you guys, and you wouldn't get this unless you looked into Paul Foster Case's work with the Builders of the Atom or the BOTA. You start to see that the same character, the Magician, that you guys can see on your sheet or up on the PowerPoint, the Magician is card number 1. You'll notice on the Magician that he's got the infinity symbol of the infinite above his head. You'll see that the roses are representing new growth, new gifts, new abilities. You'll see the 4 suits in front of him. He's starting off, he's got everything in front of him. But the High Priestess, we see the balance of the light and the dark. You see her holding the Torah in her hand, which simply means secret. You see that these two characters, the same men and women, the Magician and the High Priestess, is the same man and the same woman all the way through these 22 cards. Now the interesting thing is here, is that number 1 and 2, being the same man and the woman, they end down on card number 21. And there's a reason for that. And a lot of people don't know that reason. The number 21 is the World card at the bottom. And the World card is 21, is 1 and 2 backwards. The 1 and the 2 coming together. The man and the woman, the masculine and the feminine, the balance. And you get the perfection of the circle of the universe and all the elements. But essentially the easiest way to learn this is that let's start off with the Fool. The Fool puts his backpack on and wants to get out to the world. So he becomes the Magician. He starts taking all the gifts of the world and learning them and going about things and starting to really master his way through this. Then we move over into the High Priestess. The High Priestess, he's starting to learn the balance And this card also talks about feminine divinity and wisdom, and starts to learn the secrets of things and studying and wanting to become more, and starts to have that quest for knowledge. The Empress card, which is oftentimes associated with fertility and abundance and being out in this plush world, he starts meeting the woman of his dreams. He starts getting out there and starts to really sow his royal oats, so to speak. And over here, he starts to acquire land and starts to get this dominion and a feeling of authority. The Emperor card talks about this. Whenever you see the Emperor card coming up, sometimes it can talk about land, sometimes it can talk about moving, sometimes it can talk about those issues of getting into authority. But the Fool essentially goes into that role. Then he starts to get connected to a greater group of people. When you see this Hierophant card, it starts to talk about the church, it starts to talk about institutions, schools, groups, starts to have that connection. Then he starts to follow with the Hierophant into falling in love, and you see the Lover's card. The Lover's card is essentially talking about relationships. It's talking about love. It's talking about being in that bonding connection. And there's really that happiness that love starts to bring. Love is the most powerful force in our universe. It moves from anywhere, from A to B, like that. Okay? Then we move into the Chariot card. He's going, after you fall in love. How many of you guys have had that feeling where you start falling in love, you feel invincible for that first little bit, and everything's all going well? You go, we can do anything. We can go get that mortgage, go this, go there. And then a couple of years later, you don't like Seinfeld so much, so I'm just kidding. You're turning off the TV at that time, and they're not getting along so well. But they're in that stage here. The Chariot card comes up over here, and it shows that they're moving full speed ahead. And again, look at the Egyptian sort of symbolism here. At the bottom, we get the sphinxes and the ideas coming up. And in the Chariot card, you'll notice that there's some very rich symbolism. There's the black and the white again, from the balance. And we see the movement. He's moving fast. He's hopped on his chariot, he's flying through life. He's growing, he's getting a lot of strength. Okay, the strength card talks about, finding your personal power, feeling better about yourself, getting into that ability of feeling great. He's feeling good. He's read some self-help books. He's read the Don Miguel Ruiz and Dr. Wayne Dyer books, and he's moving into a new space in his life. But then he starts to realize that, my identity is being, jeopardized. I'm not all these things in the world. He says, I don't want to be attached to all these things, these identicality issues and false identities, false morales. So then he becomes the Hermit. The Hermit is a very significant card, very powerful. Not only is it on the front of Led Zeppelin, but essentially what the Hermit starts to show us is that to stare into darkness is clarity, because it's then we use our own inner light to illuminate the path for ourselves and others. And it is the rich symbolism of the Hermetic teachings, of Hermes Trismegistus, and these areas. You see the lantern, the torch of going within ourselves. That's solitude, disconnecting from society, finding out who you really are again. And essentially you go into the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is a card that starts to symbolize past lives. It really goes richly into that. And going into life spinning into a new direction, destiny, fate, timelines changing, the energy just shifting over to where you need to be. Okay? And then we move into Justice, which has the connection to the Egyptian aspects of Maat. You see the balancing of the scales. He starts being tried legally here, okay? He's gotten himself in some troubles because he's spoken out against the church. He's gotten himself in some real dilemmas here because he's starting to challenge the system. He went in as the Hermit, and now he's moved over to the Hangman. They're trying him. With the Hangman card, we start to see the illumination around the head, showing that there's a lot of new enlightenment in thinking. Essentially, in this card, it's showing he's being tried for all his thinking and his ideas. But essentially, with the Hangman, you're seeing delays. If you get that card, it's talking about waiting, delays, thinking, moving into those directions, essentially. Then we move into the Death card. Now, a lot of people ask me, they say, if I get the Death card, does it mean I'm going to die? No. The Death card talks about the putrefaction of old ideas. Who and what no longer serve you. And essentially, if there was a Death card, it would probably be the Three of Swords. But again, you can't predict when someone's going to die using the tarot cards. It's not going to work that way. The Death card is actually a very exciting card because it represents the ideas of change in your life, things moving into a new direction. Essentially, if you really got a download that someone was going to pass away or if something was going to happen, it may very well have that significance to your subconscious. But for the most part, the symbolism here is not that. But you see the old things on the ground moving, you'll see the lotus, you'll see all these ideas being represented. So then we move into the temperance card. After he's been hanged, he's had this transformation, this death, you move into the temperance card, which is the healing angel. And I want to say, by the way, that a lot of these cards, if you haven't already been noticing, all these cards have rich symbolism in them, and they're all connected to astrotheology. Every one of these has an astrological connection to it, most certainly even with the temperance. Then we move in from the healing angel to the devil card. The devil card is a very interesting card because you'll see the symbolism. There's a real Christian type of theme to this card in some decks. Some decks will have it as materialism. Other decks will show, for example, a lot of decks will show death as just they'll call it transformation. And they'll show it as a transitioning place from one field to the next. But in the death card, you start to see there's a man and a woman, much like in the lover's card. And they're usually nude, by the way. There's entire decks down there where the people are nude all the way through them. But in this deck, you see them tied down and chained with the devil over them. You'll notice in this particular deck, on the top of the devil's head, you'll notice that it's an inverted pentagram. And as we discussed earlier, the inverted pentagram puts spirit facing down and materialism first. This card talks a lot about drugs and alcohol, negative, unhealthy thinking, unwanted habits. People that are not in a healthy space. When you get that card, it can mean that you're in an oppressive job, an oppressive situation, a relationship that isn't so happy, going into a direction like that. So what happens is that the Fool is going through a transition in his life, his enlightenment, his awakening. We get the Tower card. The Tower card is a very significant one. It's the crumbling of the hierarchy, the royal hierarchy here, so to speak. You see in the Tower, the lightning is striking the building. Again, you'll see the Hebrew letters moving on the sides. You'll see the crown falling. The walls are crumbling on the Tower card to represent what is really going on. They're representing what's the underlying issue. So many of us put up walls. There's so many walls in many situations in our lives. How many of you have ever heard the saying, there was a white elephant in the room? So essentially, yeah, the white elephant is that thing that in a family house where no one's talking about it, where somebody has a grudge or something, where it's that unspoken thing where people, they know that you know that you know, everyone just knows, and then eventually someone says it and gets it out. That's the Tower card. That's when, for lack of a better words, the S is going to hit the fan. So it essentially comes up that way. Then we move into the Star card. The Star card has a lot of Aquarian kind of energy. Okay, there's new ideas. When you wish upon a star. Okay, inventiveness. Those sort of ideas coming up. It's the new astrological energy starting to shift around and new openings, because whenever you have a confrontation of those ideas, whenever somebody has said, you know what, hey, I'm not happy, this is what I've been holding inside of myself, this is what I've been struggling with, things start to begin to open again. You get new ideas. It's never a bad thing. Nothing in our life is really bad. I mean, it might seem bad at the time, but it all shifts. Okay? Then we move over to the Moon. The Moon card, when we see it, we see one dog that's real, and the other dog is an illusion created by the Moon. Okay? And that illusion is simply just telling us that sometimes there are illusory things in our life, things that aren't real. Some people are giving us, deceptive things. They're telling us things that aren't true. They're telling us, oh, hey, I'll be there for you next week, and they have no plan of it. Or they're telling us that they are a certain thing, and they're making it up, or for whatever other reason, they're holding on to that. And what that does is it tells us to question the things that are around us. When the Moon comes up, we get a lot of Piscean-like energy. It's also connected to psychic energy. It's basically telling you to question what's around a situation. And that's what's happening to the Fool. And he is looking up at the star, and he's wishing upon the star. He's looking to new ideas, but he's not certain what's up with his life. The next day, what happens? Well, the next day what happens is the Sun comes out. Now, if there's one card in the whole of the tarot that's connected to real happiness, to real love, to real excitement, and I guess there are other cards for love, but the real exciting, happy card that's saying you're on the right path is the Sun card. And a lot of the times you'll notice that it looks like a sunflower. And the thing that's very significant about sunflowers, one of my favorite things about them, is that they're very phototropic. They go all the way from east to west and follow the sun wherever it goes. Okay? And you'll notice that there's happiness. The sun is out, people are celebrating. The Fool is on a wonderful time of his life there. It brings us over to the Judgment card. He's finally met Judgment. He's transitioned through his trials and tribulations. You'll see it's Judgment Day in that card. And this card also talks about finalizing decisions. It could mean that you're going before the rental tenancy board and they're having a decision. And they're going to be saying this, they're saying the card will come up and it'll say next week a great decision is going to be made or a court case is going to be made. If you're doing a tarot reading and you get that judgment card and you start getting a card like, I don't know, the Ace of Coins around it or the Ace of Pentacles with the judgment card, you're in good luck. You get the judgment card and you got the devil card coming up, you're in for some good times. And so essentially, you're looking for that pattern watching again. You're looking to see the connection that your mind and your heart and your energy is going to make when you're reading these, as well as you're looking for the symbolism here. And essentially, it brings us over to the world card, which is perfection. You see the elements of the earth around these areas being symbolized. You see the circle for the infinite. You see, again, you see the infinity symbol. You see the two wands, the dancing of the angel. It's perfection. It's the universe. It's the world card talking about the balance and the reintegration of all things. And of course, this journey of the Fool, I know it's a mouthful, guys. I know it's a lot to take on that. But I don't want you to have to go into your book and say, oh, what does this one mean? I want you to look at your cards and ask them what they mean. I want you to look at them from that lane. Don't worry about being right or wrong. You know what? Clarice's definition of the card isn't going to be the same as Jane's, because they're going to be giving two different readings. Essentially, when you see this, I want you to think of the journey that you go through in your own life. What does this card mean, or this card mean, when you think of your own life and what you've gone through? What do they symbolize to you is essential for trying to reintegrate this. Okay? So now, I'd like to talk a little bit about how psychic energy works, how it's possible. Essentially, with psychic energy, we start to hear terms like clairvoyance, clairsentience, and clairvoyance is the clair comes from the Greek word clear. Okay, so the clear seeing is what clairvoyance means. You see our words like clairsentience, which is the feeling, the empathy, the intuition that you all have. Clairaudience, of hearing, claircognition, claircognitive thoughts are like let's say that you're praying or you're asking for a message from your higher self or an interdimensional guidance or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden a repetitive thought comes in your mind. And some might argue that from a psychological point of view that this might be, the subconscious, so the unconscious mind bringing it in. Fair enough. But the claircognizant thought is when you've asked for a message and it starts repeating over and over again into your mind and you can't get it out of your mind. That's essentially what we start to see. But we then have terms like psychometry, where objects can talk to you, where you can pick up an object like a photograph and read the negative ions and start to feel the energy. They start to tell objects like chairs, old pocket watches, jewelry, areas where these items can literally come alive and talk to us. There's some great books, a great how-to series by Ted Andrews, a how-to series that's, how to read, how to do psychic touch, how to see auras, how to work with spirit guides. I highly recommend all work by Ted Andrews, the great Ted Andrews. With precognition, that's when you know something before it's going to happen. We hear terms like chakras, the greater electromagnetic energy points, and auras, which we're going to get to. But I want to ask you, how many of you guys have ever been thinking about someone before and the phone rang and it was them? Wow, almost everybody here in the room.
I'm not psychic, so.
Well, essentially, I believe we've all had psychic experiences. With precognition, I'm sure that some of you have had a feeling not to drive down to a certain area before, and there was an accident. We came this close to something happening. And essentially, we all have this energy around us, this greater electromagnetic energy that's all around our bodies. We know we can measure it. We could photograph it through Kirlian photography. Have any of you guys ever felt your energy before? Could I get you guys all to do something for me really quickly? Can I get you to rub your hands together just really quickly? Give them a good rubbing together. And now, if you will, I want you to slowly put them apart, slowly, about an inch or two away from each other. There you go, you got it. And move them away, back and forth, just a little bit like that. And essentially, you'll start to feel a warmth, tingling, like an electrical, magnetic feeling. It's there. And we can measure this energy. We know it's there. And for those of you at home that are watching, you can go ahead and try this as well. And you'll notice that this feeling is very real. It's all around us. And essentially our bodies are made of this. We are interacting on these levels. You know, it's thought of in the body, we have these great electromagnetic energy points, the chakras. And the psychic abilities that we have are literally connected. As well as we are multi-dimensional beings. There is a dimensional ecology of the multiverse out there that we're connected into. And we can know this now through looking at the works of string theory, M theory, superstrings. We know through the work of like taking atom smashers and particle accelerators and looking at, you know, busting down atoms, looking at subatomic particle structures. We know that this universe is most certainly not what we think it's made of. You know, if we were to look at that table in front of you with a powerful enough microscope, I assure you that it's not solid. Everything's in constant motion around us. And so when we look at these areas, we start off with the root chakra, which is essentially, you know, thought of to connect into our physical places around us, the Malkuth, as we look at it on the Tree of Life. We start to look at this also as being like the Kundalini serpent we see coming up our spine and awakening us energy-wise that we see in the Eastern Theosophy and those sort of teachings. When we go into the spleen chakra, we get the honoring of creativity. We get the solar plexus chakra, that is the energy point where we start to feel from. How many of you have ever heard the saying, you know, I had a gut feeling? You know, this absolutely. And when you pick up an object to do psychometry, psychics will hold the object up to their stomach area to feel the energy of where it comes from. If the police are consulting a psychic, as you've seen sometimes on these TV shows, they'll see some sort of a murder weapon that they'll hold up, and they will hold it and feel where it went. They'll hold it right up that way, and they'll start feeling it that way. I mean, the very syntactical aspect of where we get, even in our own syntax of our own language, we start to get the very colors and energies of the aura being mentioned. You know, I'm sure you guys have heard the saying, you know, she was green with envy, or I was seeing red, or I'm feeling blue. We feel colors. There's a reason for that. Okay, so we move up to the heart chakra. And in Harvard, they have something known as heart math now, where when you meet someone, you're having an electromagnetic energy charge that's happening, that's interchanging with your emotional body. The heart is where we really need to be moving from. And it's actually very interesting that when we're being born, we actually start off as just a heart. And from there, as the great Drumvala Melchizedek always talks about, from our heart, it starts to poke out a little bit of the tongue. And from there, the tongue is always directly connected right to our heart. And there's actually a Chinese meridian, a secret teaching there you can look at, is touching your tongue to the root of your mouth behind your teeth, and that being a connection right from the heart into the third eye chakra, the pineal gland. Okay, so we get the throat chakra, which comes into like your hearing, your psychic hearing, your clairaudience, the connection into there. Of course, your third eye, which we're going to talk about, the pineal gland. And of course, the crown chakra, where we get the connection to spirit. And all these areas are kind of slowly connected through the 9 months of pregnancy. You get the subtle bounce of energy that starts to wrap around, and then consciousness enters towards the end. And that's why sometimes when we die, there's a period of 2 weeks over that in Jewish tradition, they ask you to cover up your mirror. So there is an aspect where they believe that if you look in the mirror in the spirit world, and a lot of you will find that if you've ever done astral projection or leaving your body, you'll get stuck in an anomalous sort of world where that's 2 weeks is what the body requires to unwind the subtle bounds of energy. Hence the reason we have a lot of the esoteric practices around funerals of wearing black and the fresh flowers for the energy and whatnot. Okay, so I'm going to get into another subject here about why I believe this is important to understand before we get into the reason that we do tarot readings and how psychic energy works. I believe a lot of the information that we see on psychic books is really antiquated. I think we have to get up to speed on how psychic energy works, how it is possible. And essentially what we'll see here is DMT. It's known as dimethyltryptamine. Okay, so for this DMT, it's very important that you familiarize yourself with what it is and what this pine cone is. This man here named Dr. Rick Strassman, he's come up with some great studies that you could look, and he's put this in a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule. And it's available here today if you want to check out a copy of it. But essentially, what we start to see is that in our head right now, you'll start to see something known as the pineal gland, or the pineal gland. And this very much looks like a little pine cone. And where this pine cone is, it's been theorized, it's been hypothesized that this is where this DMT is being created, or the spirit molecules we like to call it. And this this area, the third eye that you have, is mentioned not only in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it's mentioned all throughout all sorts of cultures where you'll see like the little third eye in the Indian culture or on the Buddha. You'll start to see it mentioned. And essentially, what we begin to see is that even in the Vatican, the pontiff has it on the top of his staff. He has a pine cone. There's a pine cone out in the middle of the Vatican, as David Wilcock has even shown in his new work. And really, what we start to see is that this DMT that's created, it is not only flooded into our brains when we die, but we have DMT trips every single night when we dream, naturally in our body right now. And it is the most powerful psychedelic known to man. But when Dr. Rick Strassman did some studies on this DMT, might I add, this DMT is found all throughout nature. Right now, it's in the grass, the trees, the bark, everything out there. In reptiles, it's even they have a cornea and a lens that's literally in the pineal gland area. But essentially, what happens is that when he was administering this DMT to people, they were having these trips where they would go out of the body through these incredible sacred geometry that would come at them, complex geometrical shapes and patterns. They go through wormhole-like configurations where they meet intelligent beings, angels, dimensions, and beings far beyond the grasp of what we can normally put and conceptualize in these areas. Incredible areas. I mean, you don't just think you're in another dimension, you're in another dimensional reality. Some even theorize that this place that people access with the DMT might be encoded into our DNA. Authors like Graham Hancock have talked about this. And he himself and David Icke have gone up and taken an ayahuasca trip over if you go to Peru or Brazil, and ayahuasca contains DMT. But this ability or this hypothesis to look at psychic ability and to see the connection into where DMT would play a role, we naturally produce this in our body, and it gives spiritual connections to energy. And this pineal gland idea isn't a new one. We can look back to Descartes and the father of modern medicine, Hippocrates. There is an argument between their two theories of where the spiritual doorway to the brain is. Was it the cerebral cortex, or is it the pineal gland? Well, these latest tests and ideas seem to correlate with that. Now here's the thing. When you wake up in the morning, your pineal gland creates serotonin. When you go to bed at night, it creates melatonin. And what they started to discover is that when they were doing different scans of the body and whatnot, there were some people that were getting a calcified pineal gland. So the certain things like fluoride, which very interestingly enough, sodium fluoride has been added into water against the people's wishes all across the United States, and been told that it helps them to have cleaner teeth, but it's actually a poison. It calcifies over the pineal gland and makes people more passive and does brain damage. There's things like aspartame, too much caffeine, too many things like that start to harden it up and make it harder to access. But you can create your own DMT in your body naturally by what you're doing. Things like Shilajit, which is Ayurvedic medicine you can add, drinking fresh water, taking care of your health, your energy body, doing stuff like the sun gazing, opening up the light. There's lots of ideas behind what brings it up. And this is actually mentioned right in the Bible as well. And I have to thank David Wilcock for mentioning this one. In Matthew 6:22, when we start to look at what Jesus was talking about up there, if your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. Okay? That single eye that it's talking about is in fact your pineal gland. And here's the interesting thing about Jesus, or Yeshua, is that he was actually an occultist, very much so. A lot of people like to portray Jesus as being this real orthodox person that was going about there, but I believe in the veracity of what we see with Jesus. Yes, the New Testament has been pulled apart and greatly mistranslated by the papal decree, and there's a lot of things going on there, and some of you might not like me sharing this, but if you look up the work of the scholars, King James, who's often quoted by all the Christians out there who don't like different ideas in social consciousness. They say that being gay is wrong in the Bible and all this sort of stuff. King James was actually a homosexual, by the way, and you can find his love letters and everything out there. They used to call him Queen James, and this has very much mentioned all the scholarly work on this. You can go look it up even on Wikipedia. There's great translations and different historical documents that correlate with this. But with Jesus had an interaction with the Kabbalah. We know that. If you look at what he said in his prayer, in the Lord's Prayer, and this is why I believe he was real, kind of like Gurdjieff suggests as him being a master. He said, in the Lord's Prayer, he said, Ato Malkuth Vogo Bara Vogo Dala Leolam Amen, in Hebrew, which means, thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever, amen. And many of you have probably heard this prayer before. And that's actually ancient Kabbalistic teachings mentioned right in his prayer when he was teaching the disciples how to pray. Furthermore, Jesus taught in parables, and he would often teach people. There's a lot of sun gods out there, sons of God. We know there's lots that had the immaculate birth, and they died in a similar way. But Jesus stands out. A lot of people want to compare Jesus alongside of many of the others that came along, like your Osiris and many of the other great examples that there are. But essentially, I believe that this is a very important passageway to look into. Okay, now here's some other stuff that you don't need to know for the tarot. But I want to mention this because each one of you is a precious, powerful, multi-dimensional spiritual being who is not only loved beyond belief, but you're an infinite consciousness. You have so much ability beyond anything that you could ever imagine. You are incredible electromagnetic fine-tuned instruments, more powerful than any computer could ever imagine to be. These two men have greatly inspired me, and I've talked about them a lot. This guy on the right is Professor Stuart Hameroff, and you can see him lecturing here. And this is Sir Roger Penrose. Now, I'm a real fanatic when it comes to reading physics books and science and looking at consciousness and all these sorts of ideas. But Professor Stuart Hameroff has talked about studying consciousness through anesthesiology over at University of Arizona. And he's actually had some incredible ideas that have been breakthroughs, much further than what we started to get in the early days of studying near-death experiences, when we used to look at them with Dr. Raymond Moody. What we start to see with him and Sir Roger Penrose, who's one of the world's leading physicists, by the way, who I think personally, when he took on Stephen Hawking's with the whole Niels Bohr-Einstein debate, I think he was like a gladiator there. But with Professor Stuart Hameroff, he's looked at the fact that when we look at the most infinitesimal levels of the universe, we start to see consciousness precursors. And if we look at the ideas that Einstein started to present to us, that matter, space, and time are all put together at the tiniest scales, the tiniest of arrangements, he started to look at the ideas that in way below atoms, when we go below deep into the atoms, beyond the electrons, the nuclei, and go way down deep, we start to see an area that we see in the universe, this roughness or this irregularity, that we can see where consciousness might be able to fit in like a groove. We start to see in our brain, right behind them you'll see these things that we start to see with these microtubules in our brain that sort of form like a microgirder or an internet system where consciousness could kind of fit into our brains like a cockpit. And where Sir Roger Penrose comes in is he says that basically when our consciousness fits in there, if we were to die or have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, how our consciousness is going to fit together is something called superpositioning or quantum cohesion, where we know that these atoms can kind of stay together and be able to come right back in. And our consciousness is using this body as a vehicle. Your bodies are like the original spacesuit, guys. It's like just a vehicle. It's a jacket that one day you're going to hang up and you're going to check out and you're going to say, peace, I'm out of here. And so literally your consciousness and energy and how you're existing in this world is far beyond anything that we can even conceptualize in our science that we have. Okay, so I want to get to the symbolism in the mind, how the tarot symbolism is going to work. Einstein often talked about the intuitive mind, the importance of the intuitive mind, the importance of imagination. When you start to see the tarot today, when you start to look at the symbolism, you have to realize how much symbolism that there is out there. Okay? There's a lot of symbolism you guys are being bombarded with all the time. There are actually 88 hidden zodiacal sort of signs in the zodiac, not just the 12 that you know about. And a lot of them, thanks to, again, like Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tazarian, we know are in the logos, that we start to see corporate logos that you guys are being bombarded with. A friend of mine has worked in Hollywood for a long time, and he's made movies, and they have just loaded your favorite movies with those symbols. They know that your mind, goes well with those symbols. And the symbols I'm talking about are the single eye, the eye of Ra, the third eye. You'll start seeing pyramid structures. All these symbols, they've been studied. You've been all studied for a long time by great schools of thought on what colors you correspond to, what symbols, what energies, and maybe it's in our DNA or subconscious, it's there. But in the tarot today, when you look at these cards, you're going to see that it's going to, maybe you'll see on the Queen of Wands, you'll see that she's got animals in the background, and you'll start to see an issue with veterinarians. You'll start to see something that's going to connect. Your mind, I want you to open up into that single eye of vision. Allow your mind to wander, that energy, and you want to keep track of that. I urge everybody to keep a journal, okay? I urge everybody to be able to write down the things that they're getting when they're making predictions, when they're having dreams, when they're having feelings. These energies are going to come up. And so it's very important that we pay attention to that. Now I want to say this, before we get on to the rest of the class, the interactive stuff, why don't we take a quick 5-minute break in case anyone has to walk around or use the washroom. Does that sound okay? Then we'll re-adjourn in a moment.